of webinars that we have. Thank you, Katie. That we have every month. Remember, it's the last Thursday every month. And before we start, we would like to share with you our promotional video, from As a Copy. So here it is. Oh, I didn't share audio. Of course, I didn't. Because, we still do those things. Even after 3 years. And we're about to begin. Okay, and of course, since you are here, because As a Copy is very glad to see you all here, and because we wanted to invite you to this and the many other webinars that we have, please do not forget our main event happening this year in Medellin, our 57th National and 3rd International As a Copy Conference. We are going to have great guests. Please visit our websites. Please visit our social media, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Join us so we can keep on building ELT community. We are very glad to see you all here. And today we have a very special guest. It is my pleasure to introduce you to a personal friend and a very special teacher. His name is Blake Marquez. Welcome, Blake.
Hi, Adriana. Well, thank you for having me here. Happy to be here.
Blake is a CELTA certified English teacher from University of Cambridge. He is also a Cambridge examiner. There is where I met him, actually. He holds an MBA and it's about to finish his MBA. He has 20 plus years of experience in English teaching, coaching, preparing people for exams, examining. He has been educational program coordinator. He has also worked as a translator and with dubbing and interpretation, proofreading, and methodology development. He's currently an entrepreneur. Professor Blake Marquez is currently a freelance teacher with a very prominent group of students. We're very glad to have him as a teacher with great results. And he's a support representative at an American fintech. Teacher Blake Marquez has been invited today because we know of the great success he has had with the methodology he uses in his lessons and the lesson preparation and exam preparation. So Blake, welcome to As a Copy. The floor is all yours.
Thank you, Adriana, for such a kind introduction. I'm not sure if I'm deserving of such nice words. I'm happy to be here. Let me just begin sharing my screen. This is how it works. I think you are sharing. You're seeing my screen already. Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Awesome. All right. So Yeah, so first I would like, well, hello everyone. I would like to thank you all for being here with us. I would also like to thank Asocopy for having me here. It is for me such an honor and a pleasure to be part of this series of webinars that they are organizing. I believe that these are appropriate spaces for sharing opinions and experiences related to our valuable, at times crazy, but certainly hopeful journey as educators. For even during the most challenging times, as are the ones we are currently living in, we need to remain hopeful in our valuable labor of shaping tomorrow's dream of a peaceful and inclusive world. Um, that dream of changing the world for better begins in the classroom. Change begins when a book is opened, and with it, the minds of those who learn. Um, with that being said, I'm pleased to bring to you today the importance of culture learning in EFL education. Now, before we proceed any further, I would like to I would like to ask all of you to ponder individually on this question that you see on the screen. What do we teach when we teach English? Let's take a minute to think about this and have a brief exercise of self-reflection based on your experience. You don't need to tell me now, but it could be a good idea to take notes of your thoughts. Now, if you are here and you are not a teacher but a learner, although frankly, even as educators, we are constantly learning, right? So we never stop learning. If you're a learner, try to think about what you learn or what is usually talked to you when you're learning English as a second language or as a foreign language. So just take a minute, make some notes, and then we will discuss. Remember, the question is, what do we teach when we teach English? You can think of specific ideas, topics, etc. All right. Um, Now, probably most of you would likely give as responses some of these that you're seeing on the screen, which is the common thing to see as we think about curricula required in our schools, universities, and courses. Probably you talked about grammar. Grammar topics, it's always important. It is like the scaffolding that we have in English language, and to organize the ideas that we want to express or that we want to understand. Probably some of you talked about pronunciation as well, and phonetical accuracy, I'd say. Probably you were thinking about skills, reading, listening, writing, speaking, and also practice. Some teachers, they try to have their classes engaging and practical, lots of activities. We have heard of concepts as well about flipped classroom, where The learning happens outside of the classroom. And then in the classroom, we come to guided practice, probably vocabulary, learning words and expressions. Probably you talked about that. Possibly structures as well. I mean, structures is not just grammar, but in general sentence structures. I mean, the composition of language itself, idioms. Some teachers, when I ask them these questions, they love teaching idioms. Or we can get a little bit more fancy, a little bit fancier with the project-based learning, assigning projects to the students, or about CLIL. I mean, you should know about CLIL already, content and language integrated learning. It is an approach for learning content through an additional language. So we are teaching both the subject and language. So we're teaching something. This is something that happens traditionally in bilingual schools or self-contained teachers. They do this a lot. Drills as well when we want to emphasize certain, specific topics. Probably you have heard about the 4 C's, haven't you? The 4 C's are sometimes known as the 21st century skills. So we have critical thinking, creativity, collaboration, and communication, hence 4 C's. I attended to a TESOL convention some years ago, and they used to tell in these seminars, forget about reading, writing, listening, and speaking. That's obsolete. What you should be teaching is the 4 C's. Critical thinking, creativity, collaboration, communication, and everything you do in class should revolve around these 4 C's. This is what like the current trend in education in the 21st century. Incorporating audio visual content in classes as well is really important. And literature, reading books. Some teachers, they enjoy doing that. So these are like very common aspects that we can think. Again, when we teach English, what do we teach? What do we incorporate in our classes? These will be common responses. Now, maybe you did think about culture or cultural aspects, but for how many of you culture was top of the list, or even among top 3 or top 5? And above all, is this the case at your institution? Some of you may be working at schools or universities. Are you encouraged, or are you indicated in the curricula to teach about culture? So, food for thought. Then, why don't we discuss culture and human interactions more often in the classroom? Let's discuss the approach that traditional education typically enforces. Now, I'm gonna take some minutes to illustrate this point. I don't want to be revolutionary. I don't want to accuse anyone. I'm just describing the current situation of education, whether we like it or not, because we as teachers, sometimes we try our best to change things one class at a time. But I'm just going to discuss the general broader perspective of traditional education. In a traditional setting, your role as an educator is to first show your hopeful or sometimes hopeless learners what is going to be taught. The what, be that a structure, new vocabulary, a drill. So you introduce what they are expected to learn. You present the topic. And then with whatever time you've got, with whatever tools you were provided, you're expected to teach them how to use this structure, these new words, how to listen, how to read, how to write, how to speak. Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to take them all from point A to point B and pray for no one to get lost in the way. One-way tickets from theory to practice. That's it. That's traditional education. Now, if you can, you might discuss why whatever is being learned is useful or important. Present perfect will help you to better talk about experiences. If you pronounce correctly, you will avoid having people confused with you. Or English is important because it will open new doors for you. Education is a privilege that your parents did not have, but you do. So you should make good use of it. And that's pretty much it. Class dismissed. But wouldn't it be worth asking a few other questions? Granted, we might think this is not our business and that we must single-mindedly stick to what the book says, what the coordinator says, what the curriculum says, what our teachers told us, and what in turn they were told by their teachers. Other questions you ask, that's up to the world out there to provide the answers for. That can be learned at home, in the streets, by life. But if life is not our business, do we truly live in the classroom? Can we truly exclude life, the real life, from the educational process and leave it at the doorstep of the classroom? The problem with education is that while we are typically sold the idea that the classroom is where life begins and where dreams come to life, it turns out that it is actually the place where most dreams come to die. More often than what we would care to admit. I know, again, I am meant to talk about culture, and you may think I'm digressing or cheating on your expectations, but I promise we'll get back on point soon enough. This contextualization, I promise, is important. Now, it seems that the educational process nowadays is more concerned about following a specific pre-laid recipe. All the steps in a carefully crafted manual from which we shall not deviate. For otherwise, we might risk failing in our ulterior purpose of forming human beings. And in our obsession for a perfect formation, we are neglecting the very humanity we intend to form. Let me prove this to you with a very single example. When we consider our ancestors, this is not our grandparents, I'm talking way back, before what we currently call civilization even existed. Our ancestors lived in caves. If you are creationists, you can think about the Garden of Eden. Now, what did they stay in a cave? Caves and Gardens of Eden, for that matter, have a thing in common. They provided security, safety. It was a place where you could eat and sleep and get shelter from menacing threats. So it makes sense to live in a cave. Now, here comes a question that might make you lose your marbles. Why did humans ever leave the cave? What was out there, outside of the cave? Food? Sure. But there had to be something more. A stronger impulse, a drive that made it worth exiting the safety of their cavernous dwellings and venturing into the unknown, under the vastness of the sky and the glitter of the stars. Some people would say that the strongest human need is hunger. What do you folks think? The strongest human need, the strongest human necessity is food, so hunger drives them. Okay, Adriana says curiosity. Interesting. Because, well, I have to acknowledge that hunger in itself drives people to do almost anything. Do we consider people who go on diets or fast and resist hunger as superhumans? So I would have to contest such notion and state that what mainly drove humans out of their caves was not hunger, but it was a spark far brighter than the fire they had lit inside the cave. It was curiosity. Yes, as Laura says, truth. Yeah, finding truth, finding new things. You see, a human may pass on dessert, but they can't pass on their eagerness to discover new things, new knowledge. The answers that they could not find inside the comfort of their caves, they had to find outside. It was an irresistible desire to know exactly what was out there. That's what drove them out of caves, out of their territories, even into new lands, across the mountains and forests, across oceans, and even off their planet into space. Curiosity that entices creativity, that follows each new answer with a new question that needs answering. That's what makes us human. That's why there are more people who like gossip than people who like diets, right? So at one point, we, society in general, no worries, I'm not blaming you or me, society in general, we replaced curiosity with compliance. We substituted the educational culture of exploring, discovering, and creating with a culture of testing and conformity that punishes diversity, that seeks standardization. Everything has to be a standard. We have effectively sent ourselves back into the cave. We have turned the educational concept, as Sir Ken Robinson says. I recommend his TED Talks on the matter of education, by the way. We have turned the educational concept into a mechanistic conception. Education nowadays is an industrial process where we take raw materials, students, we provide specific input and expect a preset output. And all products of education are expected to be the same, to do well in tests and exams, to get great scores, to be admitted at this or that university, to land jobs, to be good members of society, to do the same things in an expected standard manner. Therefore, we have effectively replaced individuality, creativity, and diversity with the standards, numbers, and conformity. We have killed, or at least pushed out, the humanity in education and transformed the whole process into an elaborate machine-making machine. Forgetting that learners are not machines, they are humans. And human beings are naturally diverse. Our dilemma with education now is that it is at odds with life outside the cave, the classroom, as Sir Ken Robinson puts it. Or I love this example from Neil deGrasse Tyson. He asserts, what is the point, after all, of teaching a kid how to stand up and walk and talk if then in the classroom later in their life, we tell that same kid to sit down and be quiet and shut up? So contrary to what our educational system traditionally believes, childhood is not a psychological condition that needs to be treated. A curious child is not suffering from ADHD, attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder. A curious child is suffering from humanity. A curious child is a human child. A curious adult learner, because we can talk about children learning, but also adults learning. A curious adult learner is not being distracted, is being an adult human. And under that perspective, it would only be natural for a student to drop out or quit learning if they are not treated as what they are: human, curious, discoverers, diverse, talented, cultural. Now, you may be wondering, why all this ranting, Blake? Cool name, by the way, Blake. Why all this ranting? Weren't you supposed to discuss about the importance of incorporating cultural elements in English as a foreign language education? Well, the reason is we can't even begin talking about the importance of culture learning without contesting the paradigms of our learning culture. We are no longer educating people into becoming successful humans. We are educating them into becoming successful test takers. And things such as arts and culture have fallen victims to that leaking. We have turned our backs on them because you can't quantify arts and culture. You can't describe those things with a letter or a number, or compare it against a standard and then compare it against other schools, other learners. Focusing on STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics is not enough if we don't have a broader perspective of education, if we don't understand truly who is learning. Addressing and celebrating the various talents of the learner and their uniqueness, all the same as what they have in common with others, their shared or distinct culture. Culture, not just that of the target language speakers, but also how does it compare with their own. Now, to teach is a verb, and just like with any verbs, it has two interpretations. What you do, the task of teaching, and effectively achieving teaching. Just like dieting. Am I dieting? Yes. Am I achieving? Likely not. So teaching is not just delivering information. We as teachers are called to mentor, to stimulate, to provoke, to engage learners. That's how we entice learning, how we encourage them to learn. You may have a fancy whiteboard, fancy chairs, fancy facilities, but if there is no learning, there's no education. So how do we right the wrong? We need to understand the educational process as what it should be. Students are individuals. Teachers are too. They need to be developed and supported, not just students, but also teachers. So the educational system has to come down from its current pedestal to the individual student in their diversity and engage their curiosity and creativity. This will heighten their need for discovery and their ability to assimilate new concepts. Only then we would be able to achieve education. So just as a barren land can thrive under a bit of rain, we need to create a climate of possibility that will allow those individual seeds to grow and flourish. And just as we need to engage the learner, we also need to acknowledge him or her as part of a community and as part of culture. We need to walk them outside of their caves, make them realize that there are new things outside to discover, other pastures, other people, and yes, even other caves. And understand that within the context of EFL learning, they are adopting a language that has been shaped by centuries, or sorry, for centuries by cultures that are not their own. Different cultures from different latitudes, they brought different things into the language. I'm going to speak about this in a minute. And all these cultures helped to shape the language distinctively into what it is today, what English is today. Globalization and interconnectivity have had an impact on that as well. Now, let's discuss a little bit about background. Now we're dwelling into the topic of culture. A significant amount of literature in English as a foreign language education has expressed various reservations about the presence of culture in the curricula. They may think it's not necessary, or maybe it is, but it's not what's most important. Or maybe it is really important, but you need to focus on a global culture. Even as English continues to develop currently as a lingua franca or common world language. Some people emphasize that what is important is developing language ability and proficiency instead of assimilating culture or establishing connections between culture and language. But the connections are obviously there. As a language that evolved from Proto-Indo-European and Proto-Germanic languages and cultures and amalgamated with several others through millennia, such as the Celts, Scandinavians, the Roman, English has been shaped by each historical and cultural interaction among its speakers with other tribes and civilizations, as I mentioned earlier. So English is only bound to keep evolving and changing naturally under these interactions. Nonetheless, authors such as Royal Sivang contend that the current state of English in the world has developed to a point where proponents advocating a single English variant as an international language or non-standard English varieties in the world Englishes model are fighting obstacles that either no longer exist or have evolved over time. So essentially the dilemma is not a dilemma anymore. So there have been concerns of learner anxiety in the classroom, some research by, among others, Alptekin and a paper from 1993. Some people have infamously coined a linguistic imperialism of English, the transfer of a dominant language to other people, among those Philipson in 1992. So this even permeates a policy level, and governments, they try to, move through these kinds of obstacles and propositions. But the reality is the native speaker culture from the United States, from England, cannot simply be separated from a language that has already left its integrated cultural imprint on non-English speaking cultures. Effectively, we would have a hard time creating an English classroom environment completely separated from the realities of English culture. Much of the standing that English as a language enjoys in the world nowadays is owed to the potential for status that comes from acquiring proficiency or with achieving English fluency, as well as the pervasive nature of English speaking culture in the popular media. So let's take a look, for instance, at a country like Japan. It is a country that lacks a concrete identity with English compared to other Asian countries, such as Singapore or the Philippines. However, in Japan, there's a test culture that has been institutionalized even. It is normal for you in Japan to learn English, and then you have to be constantly testing yourself and constantly validating your English awareness. This culture places great importance on learning English for university entrance and career advancement. For example, Japanese companies, they typically connect promotions and salary raises to proof of English proficiency. If you want more money, you have to take IELTS, for instance. You also have probably seen videos from schools in China where kids shout in chorus. I don't know if you've seen this on YouTube. There's a bunch of kids in school. And as you know, it's China. So it is like 11 million children in a single forum. And they are shouting, I need to learn English. If I learn English, I will have a future. If I don't learn English, I will bring dishonor and disgrace to my name and my family. I will dishonor and disgrace my parents who have trusted me with education. So I should study and achieve and succeed in learning English. Chinese kids, 5 years old, they say this in English over and over again. So long as native speaking English is a standard for achieving prominence in a society, language learners will naturally aspire toward it, regardless of difficulty. Indeed, despite the push for international English in the classroom, survey research has shown a continued preference in learners to acquire native-like fluency. This holds true not only in Asia, but also in Latin America, Colombia included. Why do Colombians, for instance, want to learn American English, for example? So research has shown, at least in countries where English is a minor language, such as ours, that learners of English pursue such study because of a desire to communicate with native speakers. Other learners still are drawn to popular culture originating from English-speaking countries. For instance, here in Colombia, we're greatly influenced by Hollywood and the music industry. And these learners have shown greater interest and motivation when such culture is presented in the classroom, as discovered by Chung in 2001. So the goals of removing culture from the classroom clearly do not match those of many language learners, given how students view English before they begin to study in earnest as an opportunity to become global and influent. That's why they study English. Therefore, while it is clear that newer varieties of English will continue to develop their own identities, they will do so because learners come to study English because of an interest in a language, in the language's standard most established dialects, such as American or British or Australian. What is required in the convergence of international English and native speaking culture is a shift in thinking away from the traditional perspectives on culture itself. No longer can culture be seen as a foreign invader seeking to impose a new order in other territories, or as a way of imperialism or colonialism or conquest. The paradigm in foreign language education must therefore evolve from one of treating any foreign language culture as separate from the lives of language learners into one that recognizes that multiple cultures are already present in the local contexts that learners occupy. Are Colombian learners, your learners, aware of the rich and diverse cultures inhabiting our country? Most of them don't even speak Spanish as their main language. So diversity in cultures should not be hard to assimilate. This is, after all, already the reality that language learners will encounter outside of the classroom. So raising intercultural awareness and sensitivity for cultural differences is important, as it will lead to respect for all cultures. This awareness of multicultural perspectives also addresses both the interest of learners in pop culture and the concerns that we as educators might have over learner anxiety. This relatively new concept has mainly, if not exclusively, been limited to teacher training programs so that prospective educations can manage classrooms with the students from different cultures. However, principles in culture teaching can easily be adapted to any curriculum. Fundamentally, this requires learners to be aware of and to understand the differences between various aspects of culture, for instance, semantics, pragmatics, and customs, without placing value judgments on one culture or another. Teaching culture in connection with language is a necessity. It is what is required with teaching, well, what is required rather teaching the lingua franca is a greater awareness and sensitivity for cultural differences so that respect for all cultures is effectively achieved. Now, we're nearing the end of the webinar, but jumping right away into the topic, the how do we incorporate culture into our educational process? Now, we can make use of materials in our class activities that will introduce students to the English speaking culture. These materials can either be created by a third party, mainly publishing houses or state-run and approved programs, or by the teacher themselves. So we can logically also use raw culture itself. This has been facilitated in recent times by the ubiquitous technology, social media, music, videos, memes, almost anything can be used nowadays as a window to the whole diversity of English speaking cultures. First, you may think that our main tool in the classroom traditionally has been the classroom materials that are provided by the institution or the coordination. English books have typically included cultural elements, right? So we even have books now with focus on either American or British English and their respective cultures. So who hasn't seen the typical lesson that says a group of friends go to McDonald's and order Big Macs, fries, and Coke? Listen to the conversation about the next Miley Cyrus concert and answer questions 1 to 5. Books like this, while commendable in their attempt towards approaching learners to specific aspects of culture, also tend to fall under the same standardization we have been mentioning. Quite often, they make assumptions and generalizations about the learner. I learned this myself the hard way many years ago when at an English institute, we had a very interesting lesson about flying on an airplane. And the first warm-up question was, what aspects of flying do you enjoy the most? It turns out that more than half of my students had not traveled by plane before, ever. Or for instance, how could you teach a lesson about beach activities to people who have never been to the beach in the first place? There's a great as a copy webinar by Astrid Nunez Pardo, PhD, from a couple of years ago. I think it's from July 30th, 2020. You can find it on YouTube on As a Copy's channel. There's the plug. So Mrs. Nunez argues that most materials show a monolithic, static, and dominant culture that reinforces racist, sexist, classist, and heterosexist stereotypes. They don't show culture as it is, but rather an exaggerated misrepresentation. I mostly agree with this perception, although I wouldn't discard these materials entirely. It would be up to the teachers and coordinators to create lessons and make sure to avoid any gross misrepresentations that may throw learners off the cultural learning experience, while ensuring that instructions and activities can be as inclusive as they may be. Or, on the other hand, we have a very effective tool, and what the aforementioned Mrs. Nunez's webinar was actually about, teacher-created materials. After all, who's better than the teacher to understand their students' unique needs and abilities? Nonetheless, we as educators also need to be aware of our own limitations. A school or an institution is only as good as its teachers are. And our ability to develop culture-oriented materials will also be limited by our own cultural awareness. That is why we should also become interculturally aware ourselves, so we can have the solid foundations to build upon innovative materials for our classroom, then guide our learners through all the cultural intricacies and into meaningful learning experiences. And evidently, as I mentioned before, you can teach culture with culture itself. There's a plethora of options to choose from. As I stated earlier, we are more connected than ever nowadays. And it's very easy to bring cultural samples into the classroom. And learners nowadays are naturally and critically exposed to culture through mass media. It would be ideal to create this content to tailor it to the learner's needs and profiles. They can even become more engaged by selecting their own cultural samples and encouraged to provide introduction and explanation to certain cultural aspects they are familiar with to the rest of the class. As examples that I have put into practice myself, I have already tried with a couple of groups having a musical playlist. So I create a Spotify playlist and I share it with them. And in case they don't have Spotify, I create a Padlet and then I ask them to make suggestions to a common playlist that we will collaboratively build. So this encouraged discussions, and while not always targeted towards language topics, it actually made the students engaged in their cultural awareness. They will suggest their own songs based on their own taste, but they will also become familiarized with new genres, new styles of music through their classmates. And then to make it even relevant, at the beginning of each class, I would begin by
with 2 or 3 songs from the playlist. While everybody started arriving or connecting, the playlist that they curated will be played for them. We also have movie classes, musical classes. I even tried earlier this year a UN model class, and that made them become aware of the different countries' idiosyncrasies and philosophies and cultures. And some of them were Russian. They were like a little bit manipulative. Then 3 weeks later, the war exploded in Ukraine. So that was a little bit unintentional and predictive on my end. I did not win the lottery afterwards. So, anyways, um, all of these kind of activities will encourage students to participate in cultural discussions. Same goes with trips. If they have traveled, they can discuss anecdotes from their travels. And that's always great to see. Like make them, the ones who are culturally aware, make them participate into class to make the others aware too. So the final bit of my presentation, just some statistics that from research that demonstrates the effects of cultural awareness and learners' motivation and in turn in learners' success. So for instance, this is one research that they had in Indonesia among postgraduate students learning English as a foreign language. Notice how much of an impact does the educational background has, which underlines the importance of developing cultural awareness from early on in the educational process. So students that are more culturally aware, they would react positively to when facing a new culture, and they will become more motivated in the classroom. Another study in Iran showed that teachers at a secondary level highlight the importance of incorporating cultural elements into the classroom in order to enhance the students' knowledge of culture as motivation to continue learning the language. So they underpin the direct comparison of a student's own culture with the target culture. What do we do similar? What do we do different? That's the commonest way of developing cultural awareness. However, there was a gap that was observed when between what teachers believed about teaching culture and what they were actually putting into practice. Primarily due to time constraints, the teachers complained that they didn't have enough time, and they believe that culture is important for second language acquisition, but they seem to focus more on daily aspects and English speaking countries conditions, geography, history, social, politics, before anything else, including developing language skills proper. So you have to be careful with this. Well, there's nothing bad with making students aware of a specific cultural and social conditions in other countries. Remember that incorporating culture in the classroom should be meaningful for the learner, be that in terms of either motivation only or language acquisition. So resource allocation, like time, technology, materials, training for cultural activities is also relevant for adequate preparation, and it requires the commitment of the entire educational community in general, at all levels, not just the teacher. So to finish off, 4 takeaways that I hope that you can reflect upon in the next few hours and days, hopefully. First, we need to fundamentally change the way we see the educational process. We need to acknowledge learners as creative individuals, not as test takers, not as machines. They can create things too, even in the classroom. They can even substitute the teacher as a guide and a cultural reference. So the way we engage them, though, is walking them out of the cave and into culture, because cultural awareness has been demonstrated is critical for learners' motivation in language learning. Third, we need to curate the ways we introduce culture in the classroom. So it's not just bring in a video about Kylie Minaj or like Lady Gaga, I don't know, Nicki Minaj, sorry. I said Kylie, I was thinking about Kylie Jenner and then Nicki Minaj. Anyways, mental picture, I'm gonna delete that. So meaningful materials for our students, they have to be meaningful for them. They have to address them and target them directly. And lastly, we need to establish a solid educational background, allocating appropriate resources such as time, materials, training, and technology to develop cultural awareness. A culturally aware student will be a motivated student, who in turn will be a motivated learner, will be a motivated traveler, worker, a motivated human. So don't forget humanity, the humanity of your learners. So yeah, yes, as final ribbon, these are resources and bibliographical references that I used to put together this presentation. Credit where it's due. There's tons of materials regarding this interesting topic. So needless to say, I encourage you to continue investigating about the many connections between developing cultural awareness in the classroom and English learners' motivation. Thanks, everyone. Now I believe we have some time to take in some queries. If you have questions or comments, I'd be happy to oblige.
Thank you very much. Please, whomever wants to ask a question, make a comment. You can just open your microphones, or you can also do it through the chat. So we're here to listen. Somebody has any question or comment? In the meantime, thank you very much, Blake. It was very insightful. I think it's very nice to reflect upon our own practices as educators, and probably see how many times we just repeat some patterns on the way that we were taught in the first place. And at least for me, it was very fun, because when I started learning the language, I remember my mom saying most of those things, you're going to get a better job, etc., etc. So in those, like, yeah, somebody even said, "Oh, it's great that you are studying for becoming an English teacher, because then you can get a job as a translator, or you can get a job as a, flight attendant, or you can get a job." It's like, no, I want to be a teacher. We have some comments in the chat. Um, let me read some of them. So it says, "Thank you for such inspirational words. Thank you so much. Excellent presentation, Blake. Thanks, Blake. Thanks for sharing this knowledge. Very nice and inspirational, and thanks a lot." We have in this moment 37 people with us. If you happen to have any question, anyways, this webinar is going to be recorded, and we're going to upload it into our social media. And as a final comment, for real, thank you very much. These are discussions that we truly need to have and keep on having. Andrea Galvis is raising her hand. Andrea, please.
Hey, how are you? Good afternoon to everybody. Well, first, I want to thank you. I want you for this wonderful invitation to be here in this webinar. Teacher Blake, thank you very much. Your presentation, as always, was impeccable. And well, the question I have, I don't know if it's a question. We learned the title of this webinar as about the culture related to the arts, and what teacher Blake knows how passionate I am with arts. And what I was thinking is, how can we involve art with culture in the learning of English? And there are like many ways, because like the importance of arts is related to the power of arts to express our emotions in a different way, like in a different way of communication, right? This is something that you see when you have a painting, or when you go to a role play, even when you watch a movie. But the point is, how could we relate art with culture when we are teaching English, or when we are learning, in fact?
All right. Thank you, Andrea, for what a great question. And when I was preparing this presentation, I intentionally did not include a lot of arts, because I don't consider myself as an arts expert. Well, I'm not a cultural expert either, but hey, I live exposed to culture, and not only, well,
Colombian culture, but as well American culture, and I've seen the differences. I can recommend in the topic of arts this great video. I'm gonna put it in the chat by Sir Ken Robinson. He was wondering in this video if schools kill creativity, because it is true. Arts is not something that is incorporated in the classroom. There's a nice example in that video where he says that there was a student that was not excelling in the classes. She was not becoming engaged. She was not doing things in class. And then when it come the time to the dance classes, she would be engaged and participating. The mother was told that she was a terrible student, and she was not a terrible student. She was actually a fantastic artist. So my recommendation on that would be, do what you are doing, try to fulfill your objective as teachers, but do it through art. There are many different ways you can do it. I, for one, have incorporated in classes, for instance, oh, this is cool. You all know Mona Lisa, right? La Gioconda, the painting, not the person, because then you would be very old. So do you know why La Gioconda is famous? It's not because of the painting, it's because it was actually stolen. So I created a whole new class about that, about art and about painting. Some students who didn't like painting, but at least they knew about paintings, famous paintings and Mona Lisa. And then they discovered through that story of the heist of La Mona Lisa about arts, and they became more interested into arts. So the challenge is that not everybody will have the same talents and the same interests, but you as a teacher, you have the incredible and honorable responsibility of keeping it all into the balance and try to rethink your current strategies from an artistic perspective. And then students will become involved in singing or in dancing or in jumping around or painting or creating things through art. And through art, you can teach culture itself for the target language. So, I mean, that's, again, what I would say. I'm not an expert in art, but those are strategies that I have tried and I have been very successful with them.
Thank you. I think one of the most important things is about what you're saying is that we might not be experts, but we're still building community and we are lifelong learners, and definitely sharing these kind of experiences is enriching for us all. Blake, there are people asking for how they could contact you. So if you could please leave your mail or social media in the chat. I really appreciate you to be here. Remember that you can also join us for our conference. So here, of course, have to do the publicity part, you know. Everybody, we are inviting you to all the webinars that we are going to have this year. Please join us for a copy. This year, we are going to be in Medellin with our friend, University Luis Amigo. Remember that you can follow us in the YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, where we're constantly publishing some of our activity. We are also inviting all school teachers. So if you know a school teacher that has really good ideas, we know that, you know, the classroom is a battlefield. So we, as a copy, has a special call for school teachers in private and public sectors. So if you know a teacher that has these very worth ideas sharing with our community, they are more than welcome. And of course, we want to invite you to our next webinar, the one that is taking place in April, with Professor Carolina Rodriguez from Universidad Única de Colombia, talking about something very important. English classes and ELT is not only about, as Blake said, reading, writing, speaking, listening, and grammar. There are so many things involved that we also want to talk about social emotional learning in EFL, going beyond the verb to be. So as you can see, we have like a line here, because we are much more and we are worth sharing and building, and we are part of a growing community. Thank you very much. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Blake. And we will be uploading this wonderful and beautiful and very insightful webinar. Thank you, Blake. It's a pleasure to see you around.
The pleasure is all mine. Thank you for having me, for inviting me. Such an honor and privilege.
So thank you, everybody, and I'll see you around. Follow us. We have many things going on in Asocopy. Many things going on in Asocopy, all right? Not only a conference.